Welcome back to the deep dive. I have to say, looking at the massive stack of papers we are covering today, I feel like we are walking into a bit of a minefield.
Yeah, that is that's probably the most accurate way to put it. It is certainly not light reading by any stretch.
No, it's not. We are tackling a word today that is arguably one of the most charged, controversial, and widely cited terms in the modern world. You see it in headlines, you hear it in political debates, you see it painted on flags,
Right.
and the word is jihad. And usually when you hear that word, I mean, you immediately have a very specific image pop into your head. You think of conflict, you think of war, guys in masks, that sort of thing.
Exactly, and that is the popular perception across the board. But we have a document in front of us today, a source text titled The Essence and Dimensions of Jihad in Islam. And what struck me immediately, like literally on page 1, is that if you think this is just a manual for warfare or a tactical guide for insurgents, you are missing about 90% of the picture presented in this primary source.
Right, it's a completely totalizing worldview. That was my biggest takeaway reading through this material. It felt a lot less like a military strategy and more like a complete restructuring of the human personality.
Completely.
Mhm.
It dictates how you think, how you spend your money, how you learn, how you speak to a ruler, and, yeah, eventually how you fight. But the fighting is presented as the last step, not the first. And that is exactly what we need to unpack today.
And just to be completely clear up front for you listening, we aren't here to look at this politically or to take a side or endorse anything. We are here to objectively look at the source material, the primary text, the anecdotes, the historical accounts provided. We want to understand, how does this specific worldview actually construct itself from the ground up?
Yeah, our goal is just to map out the arguments and the logic contained in the text itself.
Exactly. So here is our mission for this deep dive. We are going to deconstruct this term based on the provided material. We're going to look at the linguistics, the internal psychology, the economics, and the military ethics as presented in these sources. And I do have to warn you, and I don't say this lightly, some of the stories in this text are intense.
Very intense.
They are graphic and they are psychologically heavy.
They really are. But they are necessary to understand the internal logic of the text. You can't skip them if you want to understand the framework.
So let's jump right in. We have to start with the dictionary, because the text makes a huge distinction between what it calls the linguistic definition and the technical one. Walk us through that, because I think most people just assume jihad simply means holy war.
Right, and that's a translation error that has caused a massive amount of confusion. If you open a classical Arabic dictionary and look up the root word, which is Jud, it has absolutely nothing to do with swords or armies. Linguistically, the source defines it as exhausting one's capacity and energy.
Exhausting one's capacity. So it is just about effort.
It's about maximum effort. It's about pushing yourself to the absolute limit of your potential. It applies to speech. It applies to action. Like if you stay up all night studying for an exam until your eyes burn and you can't even keep them open, linguistically speaking, you are exerting jord. You are struggling against your own limitations.
Okay, so at its very core, it's this universal concept of striving or struggle,
Yeah.
which seems pretty relatable. Everyone struggles for something.
Precisely. But then the text pivots to the technical definition,
Yeah.
which is the legal terminology in Islamic law. And this is where the scope narrows and the stakes get a lot higher. The text defines it specifically as a Muslim expending energy and effort to support Islam, seeking God's pleasure.
So it takes that broad, universal struggle and gives it a very specific, targeted direction.
And a specific end goal.
Mhm.
The text quotes Professor Saeed al-Buti here to clarify the why. He says this effort isn't just for self-improvement or personal zen or mindfulness. He says the goal is, and I'm quoting the source directly here, the establishment of an Islamic society and a correct Islamic state.
So right off the bat, the ultimate mission statement is established by the text. This isn't just about being a good person in private. It's about building a specific type of civilization.
And that requires a very specific kind of person. This is the crucial link that the source points out, which I think many outside observers completely miss. The text argues that you cannot build that civilization if the people building it are weak, lazy, or undisciplined.
Right.
So before it ever talks about a battlefield, before it mentions a single weapon, it turns the camera completely inward. It introduces this concept of jihad an-nafs.
Jihad of the self.
Exactly. The internal struggle. This is the foundation of the entire system. The text insists that if you cannot conquer yourself, you cannot conquer anything else. The source material emphasizes that before any external conflict can happen, there is this intense, almost brutal internal struggle against your own desires.
And this is where the anecdotes in the source material really just blew my mind. Because when I hear self-discipline, I think, okay, I'll skip dessert tonight. Or I'll force myself to go to the gym when I really don't feel like it. That's my modern version of
Yeah,
struggle.
yeah.
Yeah.
That is our modern secular standard of discipline. It's very mild.
But the standard in this text is it's basically psychological warfare against your own biology. It borders on masochistic.
It creates a system of extreme accountability. The source provides these profiles of early historical figures to illustrate what this internal war actually looks like in practice. And the first one that jumps out, and definitely the one that stuck with me the most, is the story of Anaf bin Qais.
Yeah, this story, I actually had to read this section twice to make sure I wasn't misunderstanding the translation. Set the scene for us here.
So imagine a man sitting all alone in his house at night. There's a lamp burning, a small oil lamp for light. He is sitting there reflecting on his day. And he feels that he might have slipped up somehow. Maybe he said something he shouldn't have, or he wasn't focused enough, or he felt a tiny twinge of arrogance.
Just normal human stuff.
To us, yes, completely normal. To him, in this framework, these are fatal errors. So what does he do? The text says he would take his finger and place it directly into the flame of the lamp.
He is burning himself intentionally.
He is holding his finger in the actual fire until he feels the scorching heat. And while he is doing this, while he's experiencing this intense physical pain, he is having a conversation with himself. He says to his soul, "What made you do this on such and such day? What made you do that?"
That is just visceral.
It's incredibly visceral, but think about the psychology the text is showcasing here. He's using immediate, sharp physical pain to create a permanent mental association with his mistakes. He's reminding himself, if you can't handle this little lamp flame, how are you going to handle the punishment of the afterlife?
It's like he's creating somatic markers. He is literally hacking his own brain.
Exactly. He is conditioning himself like you would condition a reflex. He is acting as both the judge and the executioner of his own bad habits. It frames the self or the soul as this separate entity that you have to manage. It's almost like a wild animal that you have to tame, and sometimes that taming requires pain.
There's another story in this section that touches on this same idea, but it's less about physical pain and more about, well, curiosity, or maybe bandwidth is a better word. The story of Hassan bin Abi Sinan. This one felt very applicable to our modern world of constant distraction.
Oh, absolutely. This one is entirely about focus.
Yeah.
So Hassan is just walking down the street. It's a normal day. He sees a room or a building that he hasn't noticed before, and he simply asks out loud, "When was this built?"
A totally harmless question. I mean, I ask that kind of stuff all the time. Oh, that's a new coffee shop. When did that go up? It's just small talk.
Right. It's entirely mundane. But in the worldview of this text, Hassan immediately catches himself. He realizes he has used his breath and his mental energy on something that provides no benefit whatsoever to his ultimate spiritual goal. He realizes he has opened a door to triviality.
He wasted bandwidth.
Exactly. He wasted bandwidth. And the text says he turned to his soul and said, "You are asking about something that does not concern you." And here is the kicker, the punishment he gives himself.
He fasted for a full year?
He fasted for a year.
That just seems wildly disproportionate. A whole year of hunger for one trivial sentence.
To us, it sounds completely insane. But the text uses this specific example to show the level of vigilance required for this lifestyle. The argument presented is, if you can't control your tongue regarding a trivial question about a building, how can you control yourself in a high-stakes negotiation? How can you keep a military secret? How can you stay focused during a crisis? It is training the impulse control muscle to an Olympic level.
Right, it's hyper-discipline. It's the idea that there is absolutely no off time. Every single second counts. And there's one more example in this section that I think perfectly summarizes this internal jihad. It's the dialogue between Mohammed bin al-Munkadir and Ziyad.
This is the one where he's talking to his soul in the mosque.
Yes, and it is framed as a full dialogue. Ziyad is addressing his soul like it's a petulant child asking for a treat. He asks it, where do you want to go? Do you want a better house? Do you want to go see so-and-so? He's listing all these worldly desires.
He's acknowledging that the soul naturally wants comfort. It wants luxury. That is a human baseline.
And then he completely shuts it down.
He dropped the hammer. He says, look at your reality. Your food is just bread and oil. Your clothes are just two simple garments. Your wife is an old woman. He strips away all the fantasy and says, this is it. There is no luxury coming. Can you handle that?
And the soul actually replies to him. It says, I will be patient with this life.
And that is the victory condition in this framework. The analysis here is that jihad starts with breaking the addiction to the material world. The text argues that if you need soft clothes, good food and entertainment to be happy, you are vulnerable. You can be bribed by an enemy, you can be threatened with poverty, but if you are genuinely content with just bread and oil, you are untouchable. You are dangerous because you literally have nothing to lose.
That's a really powerful transition point, because if you are content with just bread and oil, that means you have resources left over. You aren't spending your money on yourself.
And this leads us to the second major dimension the text covers, which is jihad of wealth and educational jihad.
Right. These are presented as the fuel for the engine. You have the internal discipline, which is the driver, but now you need the gas, which is the money, and the map, which is the education. The source frames these as equal pillars to the internal struggle. Let's talk about the money first. Jihad by wealth. The text uses a historical example from the very beginning of Islam Abu Bakr al-Siddiq, the first caliph. But it is not a story about him funding an army or buying swords.
No, it's actually a story about human rights, effectively. It's the story of al-Nadia and her daughter.
Who were slaves at the time.
Yes, they were enslaved women in Mecca, and they were owned by a woman who was incredibly hostile to the early Muslims. She had sworn a public oath that she would never free them. She was working them to the bone. The text notes they were literally grinding flour by hand.
And Abu Bakr walks in. Now remember, Abu Bakr is a wealthy merchant. He is from the high nobility of the Quraysh tribe.
Right, he sees this injustice happening, but he doesn't go get a sword, and he takes out his wallet. He intervenes and buys them on the spot, specifically to free them. But there's a tiny detail in the dialogue here that the source really highlights.
It's the flour, right?
It's the flour. After he buys them and says, "You are free," the women stop working. And they look at him and ask, "Should we finish grinding the flour for her?"
That's such an amazing reaction. They are technically free in that moment, but they still feel this lingering obligation or maybe fear of their former owner.
And Abu Bakr just says, "If you wish." The source emphasizes this exact moment to show what it calls a leveling of status. Suddenly, these women are negotiating their labor. They are speaking to a wealthy noble of Quraysh as equals. The text calls this jihad by wealth because he used his capital to directly disrupt the social hierarchy. He bought their dignity.
So it's framed as more than just charity. It's structural disruption.
Exactly. It shows that financial sacrifice is a primary tool for social change. And then the text jumps forward, way forward to the 1980s to show that this principle is still meant to be actively practiced. It tells the story of Omar al-Timasani.
Right, the prominent figure from the Muslim Brotherhood. This is in 1982.
So the context is he is invited to the UAE by the Ministry of Culture. It's a big conference. He's getting the VIP treatment. At the end of his lecture, the organizers hand him an envelope. It's a check for 35,000 dirhams as an honorarium.
Which in 1982 is a massive amount of money.
It's life-changing money for a regular person. And the source implies that Tilmasani wasn't a rich man. He probably could have used that for his family, for a new house, for anything personal.
But he doesn't even put it in his pocket.
He doesn't hesitate for a second. He immediately hands the check to his colleague, Jaber Risk, and says, "Transfer this to the Afghan Mujahideen."
Just an immediate transfer.
It signals that in this worldview, the wealth of the individual doesn't actually belong to the individual. It belongs to the cause. There is no separation between your personal bank account and your political or religious struggle.
Which brings us to the other pillar of this section, education. And I really have to say, looking at the educational jihad section, if you think writing a PhD is hard or pulling an all-nighter for finals is tough, you need to hear about what al-Bukhari did.
Al-Bukhari is presented as the gold standard of scholarship. He is the compiler of the Sahih al-Bukhari, which is considered the most authentic book of hadith, or sayings of the Prophet. The text frames his academic work as a grueling, almost punishing physical struggle. It is definitely not just reading books in a cozy library.
It mentions he started classifying issues when he was only 18. He was writing history books, sitting by the Prophet's grave, working by moonlight because he couldn't even afford candles.
Total dedication. But it is the spiritual rigor that is just exhausting to even think about. The text says that for every single hadith he recorded, and there are thousands of them in his book, he would first perform a full ritual bath, a ghusl, and then pray 2 units of prayer.
Wait, just do the math on that for a second. A ritual bath is a full shower. He did that for every single entry.
Yes, thousands of entries, which means thousands of baths, thousands of prayers. It turns academic scholarship into an intense devotional ritual. It isn't just an intellectual exercise, it's highly spiritual. It forces this extreme slowness and reverence for the material. But the jihad part, the physical struggle, really comes through in the story of him visiting a scholar named Adam bin Abi Es.
This is the eating grass story.
Yes, so Bukhari runs out of money while he's traveling. He is in a foreign city, but he is too proud, or perhaps just too intensely focused on his work, to stop and ask anyone for help. So for 3 days, he eats herbs and grass off the ground just to survive.
He is literally grazing like an animal so he can keep studying.
Yes, and he didn't tell a soul. Eventually, an anonymous stranger gave him a bag of dinars, but the main point the text is making is that he was entirely willing to starve himself to preserve the knowledge.
And then there's that scene that really showcases his raw mental horsepower. He's traveling to Basra with some companions. Everyone else is writing everything down during the lectures, just scribbling furiously. Bukhari is just sitting there doing nothing.
And his friends start nagging him. They're like, why are you even here? You're wasting your time. You aren't writing anything down. They think he's just being lazy. And this dynamic goes on for 16 days.
16 days of constant peer pressure.
Finally, Bukhari snaps just a little bit. He says, okay, show me what you wrote. They bring out their notebooks. It's about 15,000 traditions.
15,000 separate items.
And al-Bukhari proceeds to recite all 15,000 perfectly from memory. And not only that, he actually corrects the errors they made in their written notes based on his memory.
That is just an absolute mic drop moment.
It's a total flex.
Yeah.
But the source frames this as a form of jihad because he is preserving the code of the civilization. He viewed his own memory as a fortress. He told his scribe later, people are busy with amusement and trade, but you are with the prophet and his companions. He truly believed that by studying, he was literally sitting in the company of these holy figures.
So we've built the foundation here. You have the self-discipline by burning the finger. You have the wealth committed like Abu Bakr. You have the knowledge mastered like Bukhari. Now the text moves the camera out to the public square. It starts talking about political jihad.
And it specifically labels this the superior jihad.
Right, this is based on the famous statement. The best jihad is a word of truth in front of an unjust ruler.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the narrative the source uses to illustrate this is incredibly cinematic. It takes place in Egypt during the reign of Khedive Ismail.
And the context is pretty grim. Egypt is at war with Abyssinia, which is modern-day Ethiopia, and it is going really badly for Egypt.
It's a total disaster. Defeat after defeat. The army is completely demoralized. The Khedive is furious. And in his desperation, he turns to religion. He asks the scholars of Al-Azhar University to gather and read Sahih al-Bukhari.
The exact same book we just talked about.
Right. There was this cultural folk tradition that reading this specific book in times of crisis would bring relief or victory from the sky. So the top scholars gather, they read, they pray.
And what happens?
Absolutely nothing happens. The news comes back from the front lines. Yet another devastating defeat.
So the Khedive marches into Al-Azhar, and he is not happy.
He explodes. He accuses the scholars of being frauds. He says, either this book is fake or you are fake scholars, because the victory didn't come.
I mean, imagine the tension in that room. You have an absolute ruler, a king basically, screaming at the religious establishment, effectively blaming them for losing a war.
The room goes dead silent. Everyone is terrified, except for one man sitting way in the back row, a scholar named Sheikh Muhammad al-Mahdi. He stands up.
And he doesn't apologize.
No, he points the finger right back at the ruler. He says, it is because of you, Ismail.
He blames the king to his face.
Right to his face. He says, effectively, you want victory from God. Look at your own administration. And he starts publicly listing the sins of the state.
What exactly does he list?
He says, you have established mixed courts that allow usury meaning interest. You have licensed adultery, which was referring to the legal prostitution that was taxed by the state at the time. You have made alcohol permissive. He asked the Khedive, how do you expect victory from the sky when these corruptions are happening on the ground?
That is a fascinating connection the text is making. He is directly linking military failure on the battlefield to moral failure in society.
It's the core thesis of the text showing up again. The external reality is always a reflection of the internal state. The argument is, if the society is rotting from the inside with usury and vice, the army will rot in the field.
And what does the Khedive do? Because in a lot of historical stories, this is the part where the scholar immediately gets executed.
Well, in this story, the Khedive is just stunned. The text says he eventually hung his head and admitted, you are right. The source uses this to demonstrate that political dissent isn't just a democratic right. It is a strict religious duty. But notice the framing here. It isn't a rebellion for the sake of anarchy or gaining power. It's rebellion for the sake of moral correction. It's speaking truth to power to bring that power back in line with divine law. It suggests that the scholar is the ultimate, final check on the politician.
Okay, so we really have to address the elephant in the room now. We have gone a long time in this deep dive without talking about actual combat. But the text definitely does talk about it. It has a whole section called Jihad of Enemies.
And it is very explicit when it gets there. It cites Quranic verses that say, sitting, which means staying behind during a conflict, is not equal to striving. It quotes a hadith saying that a morning or evening spent in the path of God is better than the world and everything in it.
But it also introduces a very specific theological concept here, quoting the writer Sayyid Qutb. It talks about the curtain of power. Can you unpack that for us?
This concept is crucial for understanding the military mindset presented in the text. Qutb writes that believers are merely a curtain. The idea is that God's power is what actually operates the universe. When a believer fights, they are just the physical screen behind which God is acting.
So it completely removes the human ego from the equation.
Completely. If you win a battle, you didn't win, God won. If you strike an enemy you didn't strike, God struck. It turns the soldier into a pure instrument. It removes the self from the act of violence.
But if you view yourself as just an instrument of divine will, does that mean you can do whatever you want in a war? Because the text spends a lot of time comparing what it calls Islamic warfare to what it labels civilized warfare.
And it is a really scathing comparison. The text argues that modern Western warfare is actually what's barbaric. It talks about suffocating raids and heinous atrocities. It suggests that modern war has absolutely no limits. You have napalm, aerial bombing of cities, total mass destruction.
It's critiquing the modern concept of total war.
Right. And in sharp contrast to that, it lists the lordly rules of jihad.
What are the specific prohibitions it lists?
No treachery, no mutilation of dead bodies, no killing of children, women, the elderly, or monks inside their monasteries. The command it highlights is, fight those who disbelieve, but do not transgress.
So there are very strict rules of engagement.
Extremely strict. The source argues that the means must be as noble as the end. You cannot build a moral society by acting immorally on the battlefield. It's an ethical paradox. You have fierce, uncompromising fighting, but it's bound by tight moral constraints.
But then we get to the philosophy of death. And this is where the text quotes Hassan al-Banna, the founder of the Muslim Brotherhood. He talks about the art of death.
This is the central paradox that drives the whole movement. Al-Banna says, the nation that masters the art of death, God grants them a noble life in this world.
Masters the art of death. That just sounds really ominous. It sounds like a death cult to a modern listener.
It absolutely sounds suicidal to a modern ear. But the logic is based on a kind of game theory in a way. The logic presented is that fear is what makes you weak. Fear of dying is why you accept a tyrant ruling over you. Fear of dying is why you accept colonization. You just want to survive, so you capitulate.
So if you remove the fear of death entirely,
You become completely ungovernable. If you view death not as the tragic end, but as a gateway to martyrdom and paradise, you cannot be threatened. You can't be scared into submission. Al-Banna is arguing that by embracing the inevitability of death, you actually secure a life of dignity and freedom. It's the ultimate form of leverage.
and the text doesn't just leave this as an abstract theory, it gives us these profiles in courage. And they span over 1,400 years of history. I want to zoom in on a few of these because they illustrate this art of death in very different, fascinating ways.
Let's look at Thabit bin Qais first.
This one is deeply human. Thabit wasn't afraid of dying. He was afraid of being too loud.
It's true. It's such a specific, almost funny anxiety. There was a Quranic verse revealed that warned people not to raise their voices above the prophet's voice, lest their good deeds be nullified.
And Thabit just had a naturally loud, booming voice. He was just a loud guy.
He was terrified. He sat in his house crying. He thought, I'm loud, so I've accidentally canceled out all my prayers. I'm going to hell.
It's almost tragicomic. He thinks he is spiritually doomed because of his natural volume.
But the prophet reassures him. He tells him, you will live praiseworthily and you will die a martyr. And then the text fast forwards to the wars of apostasy, specifically the battle against Musaylima the liar. Thabit remembers this promise. He actually puts on his shroud, his white burial cloak, before the battle even starts.
He dresses for his own funeral.
And he charges in, fighting alongside Zayd bin al-Khattab. He fought until he was killed, fulfilling the prophecy. It shows that the psychological preparation for death starts long before the battle. He had already accepted it as a fact.
Then there's the story of the hour of hardship at Tabuk. Now, this one isn't about fighting the enemy. It's entirely about endurance.
This is about extreme thirst. Omar bin al-Khattab describes the scene. The army was marching in the intense desert heat. It was so severe that men were seriously considering slaughtering their own camels, which were their transport, their only reliable way to get home, just to drink the raw fluid from the camel's stomach.
That is just pure desperation.
It illustrates that the struggle often isn't clashing swords. It's surviving the elements. It's raw physical resilience. And then you have the Battle of Mu'tah, which shows the relentless chain of command.
Right where the commanders keep falling, first Zaid, then Jafar, then Abdullah bin Rawaha.
And the text makes a point to describe finding Jafar's body with over 90 wounds on it, but none of them were in his back, which signifies he never once turned and retreated.
But the story that I think we really need to spend the most time on, and this is the one that is the most difficult to digest but also the most revealing, is the story of Abu Qudama and the boy.
This is a very famous narrative in this specific genre of literature. It is highly stylized, almost mythic in how it's told.
So Abu Qudama is recruiting for an army. A woman approaches him. She has no money. She can't fight. So she literally cuts off her braids, her own hair, and gives them to him. She says, use these as reins for your horse.
It's a symbol of total, absolute sacrifice. Her hair was her beauty, her dignity, and she gives it to the war effort because she simply has nothing else to give. But then her young son shows up.
And he is just a kid. The text calls him a Gulamgar, an inexperienced boy, maybe a teenager at most.
Abu Qudama tries to send him home. He says, you're too young, you have parents you need to take care of. But the boy argues back. He quotes the Quran about not turning away from duty. He basically debates his way into the squad. He out-talks the veteran commander.
So they go to battle, and this is where the story gets quite graphic. The boy asks Abu Qudama for 3 arrows.
It follows the classic rule of 3, like a parable. He takes the first arrow, he shoots, he says, by the name of God. He kills a Roman soldier. He takes the second arrow, same exact thing, kills another soldier.
Yeah, and the 3rd arrow.
The 3rd arrow, he is killed. He is struck down. But the story doesn't end there. Abu Qudama goes over to the boy. The boy is dying, and he reminds Abu Qudama of a very specific prayer he had made earlier.
He prayed to be gathered in the crops of birds.
Which is a highly poetic way of saying he wanted his body to be left out on the field and eaten by scavengers. He wanted to disappear completely into the earth. And the text says the birds actually did descend. It adds this layer of mystical fulfillment to his death.
But the most shocking part, the part that really defines this whole ideology, is the mother. Abu Qudama goes back to her town to tell her the news.
Imagine the scene. He walks up to her. She sees his face. She asks one single question. She does not ask, is he dead?
She asks, should I be comforted or congratulated?
Think about that binary for a second. If he died a normal death from illness or an accident, comfort me, because that is a mundane tragedy. But if he was martyred, congratulate me.
Because he won.
Because he won the ultimate prize.
Yeah.
When Abu Qudama says he was martyred, she says, Alhamdulillah, praise be to God. And then she reveals his secret to the commander. She opens the chest and shows Abu Qudama a set of heavy iron shackles.
Shackles, like chains.
Yes. She explains that the boy used to chain himself up at night to force himself to stay awake and pray. He used the physical shackles to fight his own sleepiness. The source uses this to make a critical point. His bravery on the battlefield wasn't accidental. It was a direct result of those nights in chains. He was, as the phrase goes, a monk by night, a knight by day.
It's an intensity that is really hard to process. It ties the internal discipline we talked about in Section 1 directly to the battlefield in Section 4.
Exactly. It's a closed loop. The internal war fuels the external war.
And the text shows that this mindset continued right into the modern colonial era. It profiles Omar al-Mukhtar, the lion of the desert, fighting the Italians in Libya.
The image of him is just incredible. He is an old man. He is sick with a fever. He is fighting modern Italian tanks with horses and old rifles. And he has to be literally tied to his saddle so he doesn't fall off from pure exhaustion during the battles.
But he flat out refused to surrender.
His famous line from the text, "If the cannon breaks my sword, the falsehood will not break my right." It is that absolute refusal to acknowledge the moral authority of the conqueror. He fought not necessarily to win militarily, but to witness to the truth as he saw it.
And then there's Ahmed Eid in 1948 Palestine.
This one is incredibly visceral. Ahmed is badly injured in a fight. His friends try to evacuate him. He refuses to go. He tells them, "I smell paradise." Is that sensory conviction again? He runs back up the hill towards the enemy. Later, they find him dead. He is lying on top of a Zionist soldier.
And his hand.
His hands are locked around the soldier's neck. The text notes that they couldn't even pry them apart. They'd become one piece in death. It portrays a commitment literally to the last muscle twitch.
And finally, in this section, Yusuf Talat in 1949, this is the guy who used disguise.
Yes, he was evading British detection. He walked right past their patrols, disguised as an old man carrying a baby. The text specifically highlights his calm nerves. This ties right back to the internal jihad we discussed. If you have conquered the fear of death, you can walk right past your executioner without your pulse even racing. You can act with total clarity.
So we have covered the self, wealth, politics, war, and the martyrs. To wrap all of this up, the source text provides a classification system developed by Hassan al-Banna. It lists 8 distinct types of jihad, and this really brings it home that this is a whole-of-life system.
It's a perfect summary of the entire worldview. Quickly, let's run through them because they show the sheer breadth of the concept. First, emotional jihad. This means simply feeling pain for the suffering of other Muslims. The idea is if you don't feel it, you aren't really part of the body. Second is intellectual jihad, thinking deeply about solutions for the ummah, the strategists.
Third is sacrificial, giving your time, giving your money, personal demands.
Fourth is correctional, commanding good and forbidding evil. This is social reform, fixing your local community. Fifth is social boycott. This is an interesting one, abandoning or shunning those who oppose God, not eating or drinking with them.
Sixth is military, being a soldier prepared for defense. Seventh is political or legal, establishing justice and curbing oppressors.
And the eighth is loyalty, loving the mujahideen even if you cannot physically join them.
So the message is, if you can't fight, you pay. If you can't pay, you study. If you can't study, you boycott. There's simply no opting out.
Exactly. The text makes a linguistic note that the word Muslims appears 41 times in the Quran, and the word jihad also appears 41 times. It views this as a literal mathematical equation. You cannot have one without the other. It rejects passivity entirely.
So what is the final thought here? What is the provocation for you, the listener, to take away from this?
I keep going back to that father, the one Omar al-Tilmasani visited in the modern examples.
The one who lost his son in combat.
Right. Tilmasani goes to his house to offer condolences. The father stops him at the door. He says, if you are here to comfort me, go back. If you are here to congratulate me, welcome. It's the exact same sentiment as the mother we talked about earlier.
But then he calls over his second son.
He calls his remaining son into the room. And he makes Tilmasani swear to take him to the battlefield too. He says, I am eager to double the reward.
He is doubling down. He is offering his entire lineage.
It leaves us with this really challenging philosophical thought. The text argues that what we call life safety, comfort, longevity is actually a trap if it lacks dignity. And what we call death, if it is chosen for a higher cause, is real life. It asks you, is mastering the art of death actually a strategy for living a truly dignified life?
That is an incredibly heavy question to end on. That was our deep dive into the essence and dimensions of jihad. We will let you sit with that one. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.